problem at all. At the back of the human eye, there are rods and cones which convert electrical photons, if you like, into electrical energy. I'm not going to spend any time talking about that at all, because I have actually already done a whole program on the eye. So let's maybe move on and to talk about the ear. The ear is a really complicated piece of machinery. There are lots of sounds coming from my voice box, my larynx, and they're causing your eardrum to vibrate. And your eardrum is called a drum because it's kept very, very tense, like a drum, by a little tiny muscle called the tensor tympani muscle. And then the sounds are multiplied 22 times by tiny little ossicles. And then the sound waves go through to the inner part of the ear, which is called the cochlea. And within the cochlea, there's a wonderful membrane called the basilar membrane, which converts, it's like a harp. It converts all the sounds into electrical impulses which go to your brain. And that's how you hear. But that's not all your ears do. Your ears also have semicircular canals, which actually help you to balance. That's why I'm not falling off my chair, and that's why you're not falling off your chair, because your semicircular canals have got little, tell your brain, your supercomputer if you like, where you are, so that all the various muscles contract so you don't fall off your chair. I'm just going to talk a little bit about our touch. I'm not going to spend very much time talking about our touch. I'll be talking about that in a later program. But it's actually one of the most refined devices ever discovered. And when we touch anything, we send these amazing impulses to our brain at 124 miles an hour. Let's think about our taste buds. Your taste buds are actually very, very complicated, and they don't last very long. They only last 10 days because they are so complicated. We produce a litre of saliva every day in order to get the food to go down our esophagus, our food pipe. One of the very good reasons we have very sophisticated taste buds is so that we can make sure that everything we eat is fresh and not going to cause us trouble. If I were to give you some food which had gone off, it wouldn't smell very nice and you wouldn't eat it. Quite right too. Your taste and your smell says, don't eat that. So that's one of the things that God has programmed into you, if you like, is when things are nice to eat and when they're not nice to eat. All right. I'd like to talk very briefly about our larynx. That's in your throat, and that's the little machine that enables us to speak. We can speak by causing our vocal cords to vibrate. And by the way, your voice doesn't sound like my voice. We all have individual voice patterns, if you like. A bit like our fingerprints, they're all different. And they're all made of different modulations and different vibrations and different tones and different frequencies. And I'm going to be spending a whole program just talking about how it is that we actually speak and create the sounds that we make. It's a really, really complicated piece of anatomy, is our larynx. And I'd like to move on now and talk about a skeleton now. We take our bones very much for granted, but actually they are really complicated. They're very, very complicated. They have all sorts of things to do. They provide, of course, strength for us. They support us so that we can stand upright. They protect our organs within our body. I'm going to be talking in another program about our joints, how they provide leverage, so that, for example, I can lift something up, something very light, but something very heavy, because of a principle called leverage. And also, I mentioned they protect, but within our bones, we all produce our blood cells. Our red blood cells are produced inside most of our bones. And of course, we need our red blood cells because that's how we carry oxygen around our body. You'll notice I'm actually just covering each of these different systems just very briefly. I'm not trying to give you at this point, a very in-depth study on each individual system, just trying to give you an overview of each one. So let's just look at those muscles I mentioned. The muscles are really, really complicated. We've actually got about 600 of them. I hope you like smiling, because smiling is actually much easier than frowning. If you smile, you use 20 muscles, and if you frown, you actually need to use 40. So it's actually much simpler to smile. So save yourself some energy and spend more time smiling than frowning. And I'm going to be spending a whole program talking about muscles and how it is that they contract. And it is really, really complicated. Just talk a little bit about the circulatory system. It's how the blood moves around our body, and how this amazing organ called our heart is a pump. It's in the center of our chest. It weighs about 3 pounds. It's not very big. And we've got all this blood that moves around our body, 9 or 10 pints of it. And it carries all the oxygen in our hemoglobin, which is an incredibly complicated molecule. It picks up all the oxygen from the air and delivers it safely into our muscles. And within our muscles, the oxygen is converted into energy in the mitochondria. ADP is converted into ATP. And that itself is very, very complicated. It's called the Krebs cycle. It's actually so complicated, I'll be spending another program just talking about the Krebs cycle. And no, it is so complicated, I can't begin to tell you how complicated it is. Just a few more systems. We have a nervous system. There's a picture of the nerves. We've actually got 45 miles of nerves going through our bodies. Can you imagine that? 45 miles of nerves coming from our brain. I've already mentioned the brain, which manufactures its own electricity. Well, the signals from the brain travel through 45 miles of nerves all over the body at 250 miles an hour. And the way that those electrical impulses are conducted is absolutely fantastic. I can't tell you about it now because it is so complex. It's all about sodium and potassium and calcium ions moving in and out of the cell membrane. Then we will be talking in the future about the skin. And the skin is the body's largest organ. You're familiar with your skin, but what you're not familiar with is how complicated it is. And I haven't got time to tell you now exactly how complicated it is, but trust me, it is very, very complicated. We have an immune system, which is very, very efficient, our immune system. It's the reason we don't get sick. You see, where I'm sitting and where you're sitting, wherever you are, you're surrounded by bacteria and viruses and fungi, and all these things would kill us very quickly. But our immune system is incredibly good at keeping us well. Very, very few bacteria actually cause sickness. Very, very few viruses actually invade our body and cause sickness. Most of them are killed off before they've done anything nasty to our bodies with our immune system. I want to talk a little bit about the digestive system. It's basically the system. We eat our food, it goes to our stomach, which is about 1.5 liters in size, and then the food is processed to take away from the food all the various molecules of which the food is made, and take them to the liver where it's processed, made into glycogen and glucose and all sorts of other things. I'll be telling you about that in the future. But one thing I do want to emphasize, this is really, really complicated. It's not simple. It is really, really complicated. Just have a little look at the lungs, the respiratory system. If I just tell you that our lungs are about the size of a tennis court, the surface area of our lungs is about the size of a tennis court. And using our lungs, we extract all the oxygen from the air and breathe out all this toxic carbon dioxide, which is acid, by the way. We need to get rid of that carbon dioxide because it's acid, and basically is toxic to our bodies. So I want to emphasize to you just how amazingly complicated our human body is. There's a picture of, we're going to show you a picture of the liver, which is the chemical processing factory of our body. About 500 different chemical processes going on there all the time. You're not aware of it, but it's happening all the time. It's our central processing body. We've got some kidneys, and our kidneys just filter our blood and take away all the impurities. I'll be spending a whole program talking about the kidneys. And then we've got a reproductive system to make little babies, little versions of you and me. And by the way, they're not called fetuses, they're called babies. The Bible doesn't have a word called fetus. But, and the other thing is that life does start at conception. That's when our life started, right at conception. And we do have another very complicated system, which I was spending quite a lot of time on. It's a long word. It's homeostasis. I'm not even going to try at this point to explain that to you. What I'm going to tell you is what it's all about. You see, our body is a chemical factory, and we have to maintain oxygen at the right level, carbon dioxide at the right level, pH at the right level, the temperature at the right level, the metabolic rate at the right metabolic rate, and all sorts of other parameters. And I'm going to explain to you, or try to explain to you, even though it's quite complicated even for me to understand it, just how this works and how complicated it all is. So let me just wind up and just tell you about the human body. I've just given you a little brief overview. It's the most complex machine on the earth. There's nothing even remotely close to the complexity of the human body. The brain is the most sophisticated computer in the universe. Our DNA is the most complex genetic code in the universe. Hemoglobin, which is designed to carry oxygen, is the most sophisticated example of molecular engineering ever discovered. I want to read a scripture to you. It's in Isaiah chapter 40, verse 28, and this is what it says. Do you not know, have you not heard, the Lord is an eternal God, the creator of the whole earth. He doesn't get tired or weary. There is no limit to his wisdom. Do send us some feedback on info@Revelation TV. I've also got a website. It's freechristianteaching.org. And you can see all these programs and lots of free DVDs as well on Free Christian Teaching. Thank you for joining us, and do join us again on To The Point. God bless you.